Now, welcome. So, week's a long time in rugby. Last Monday, Munster were off the back of a very good performance in Toulon. It was encouraging. La Rochelle had put down a marker in Dublin. They could still mix it in this tournament. And Scott Robertson was the New Zealand coach. So Robertson's no more, and Munster and La Rochelle dumped out of the pool stages. They're into the Challenge Cup. The knockout stages of the Champions Cup have taken shape. Leinster will not hate it by any means. Bordeaux, Toulouse, Bath, all on the other side of the draw. So Leinster have home advantage against Edinburgh in the quarter-final, home to Harlequins or Sale. And then obviously semi-final, there could be Toulon, Glasgow, Bulls, Stormers. They would be away to Glasgow, who finished second in the overall standings. But that's a while away yet. But even the money has sort of flowed in that direction. Leinster and Bordeaux now joint favourites for the tournament, Toulouse and Bath behind them. Our rugby coverage on Indo Sport is sponsored by Energia. They sponsor rugby in Ireland at all levels. Grassroots with the AIL, and they are official energy partner to Leinster, Connacht and the Irish men's and women's teams. To learn more about Energia's rugby partnerships and their exclusive home energy offer for rugby fans, you can visit energia.ie/rugby. Happy to say Eddie O'Sullivan is with us. Hey, Eddie.
How you doing, Joe?
And Rúaidhrí O'Connor here in studio. Hello.
Hey, Joe. Hey.
So my intro there focused a little bit on Leinster, but obviously we're starting with Munster. That is the story. They'll be in the Challenge Cup away to Exeter in the last 16, and then Cardiff or Benetton in the quarters, and then maybe La Rochelle once again around the corner. That feels of kind of faint consolation right now, Rory. They've lost 4 games in a row, and with it their season has just been completely upended.
Yeah, I went down to interview Clayton McMillan the week of the Stormers game, just on the back of the November internationals, and found him to be an incredibly impressive person. Really enjoyed interviewing him. And that Saturday they went out and they blitzed the Stormers in the first half of a really important top of the table URC game. And at half time were, I think, 21 something up, but they were on course for a bonus point win that would have put them clear in the URC after 6 games, unbeaten. And then the Stormers come out. John Dobson brought on a 6-2 bench and went full bomb squad. And the Stormers destroyed their scrum, destroyed their maul, and won the game. And they haven't recovered. They've been terrible ever since, really. If barring a bit of a flurry against Leinster, a flurry in Toulon when their backs are against the wall, and that 5-game winning start, which included that brilliant win in Croke Park, which McMillan, in fairness, was saying at the time, we can't get carried away with our start. It's just faded into memory, and it's become their worst season in quite some time. It's quite shocking, and McMillan looks stunned in the coaching box repeatedly over the last couple of weeks. I remember in Bath, he sat after the full-time whistle went, he sat for a while as the other coaches kind of tidied up and left and went down to the dressing room to just gather his thoughts, because that Bath game was such a shock to the system. That came a week after that Stormers game. Those double body blows just seem to have just kind of almost knocked them out, and they found themselves in this bit of a doom spiral. They obviously played their part in a really good game on Saturday evening, and there were some great individual performances, but they were left a bit. I don't know, did they underestimate Cast, because Cast have such a history in this tournament of being no-shows in games like this, but that's not reading their recent history. They got to knockouts last year and gave it a good go. So it's a really damaging start to his tenure. It's a really disappointing result. It's going to cost them money. It's going to cost them status. It's cost them loads of momentum. It's going to cost international spots. It's such a bad result. It's such a badly managed pool stage. Not getting a bonus point in Bath. They nearly didn't get a bonus point in at home to a really weak Gloucester team in Porky Queeve, which was a really poor performance. They rallied last week and then just couldn't get the job done on Saturday, and probably a reflection of where they truly are in terms of budget and their squads and all that sort of stuff, because you look at the Cast team and they have a lot of really good players, and maybe Cast should be beating Munster based on what they're spending and who they have on board, but that's not what we've come to expect. We've always expected Munster to be able to punch above their weight. So yeah, it's a really gloomy, and I say Munster fans are waking up this morning in a bit of despair about the kind of prospects.
Yeah. Eddie, it's, like I said, just last Monday, we were talking about a very spirited, well-organised, committed performance in Toulon, encouraging, and now their season has completely folded in on itself.
Yeah, I can see, if you look at the outcomes from Munster, it's pretty gloomy. They've had a bad run of form. they've lost a couple of big profile games. It's cost them their spot in Europe, and it has damaged their season. And it does look like they're in a bit of a downward spiral. The other side of it, I'd be a lot more optimistic maybe than Rory about it. I think there's a lot of good things there at the moment. If you focus on the outcomes, yeah, it's not good. But I think for me, I thought, as I said last week, the performance in Toulon was one of their best of the season. I thought they played some really good rugby. I thought they got robbed at the end of the day. A really shocking refereeing decision cost them the game. And if the ref gets that right and Munster won Toulon, they would have said they deserved it. I thought again last weekend, I'm not taking that away from Castres because they came to play, and there was times you were waiting for Castres to fold their tent, and for whatever reason they weren't. It wasn't on, and they played on, and they got some great tries. But I think there was a lot to take out of Munster again on the weekend. They played some sparkling rugby. They scored 5 tries. They were 2 very good performances, and I hate to say it because ultimately advantage, but I thought Crowley had nailed those conversions. They could have gone 2 wins in a row here if the referee hadn't got it wrong on Toulon and Crowley nailed his conversions. We would have had 2 wins. They'd have been in the quarters, had everything sweetness and light. No, I'm not taking away from the fact that the outcomes are the outcomes and that's your judged on. But I wouldn't be as pessimistic. The question I think for them now is, can they see the good things that they've done and use that as a springboard? Or I think Rory's a point here that when you get yourself in a bit of a hole like that, things are going against you. Does the team head drop a bit and they lose confidence?
Yeah.
So it's almost so like what's done is done. Is can they rescue their position and build off of the good things they've created in the last 2 weeks? I'd be more optimistic about it. I thought they were pretty honest after. There were small things that cost them at the end of the day, small mistakes, but at the end of the day, if you're judging outcomes, it's gloomy. But for me, it's a bit more upbeat, I have to say. I thought, they've played some really good rugby. They look like they're comfortable in their skins, but at the end of the day, you've got to get the results. And at the back of that, it's pretty gloomy in Munster this weekend, all right.
What about that, Rud? No doubt the outcome is horrendous. I do see where Eddie's coming from.
I think Munster are a good team.
Yeah.
That's I would. There is a good team there. There are good players there. There is a really good out half. But I think he's almost symptomatic of the entire organisation in that all of the good things that he's doing are being undermined by small errors of execution and decision making that are letting the 90% of the stuff that's very positive down. And you look at the French teams that played against the Irish teams this weekend, who, Bayon had nothing to play for, and you look at Nolan Le Garrec for La Rochelle last week, they're nailing every conversion pretty much. I know Bayon missed a pivotal kick at a pivotal time. I'm not saying they're perfect, but there seems to be a higher standard, say, at the line out, at set piece of execution, and they're not letting 2 points. And this has been an issue with Jack Rowdy going back to last year's Champions Cup and the year before. They're not turning 5 into 7. And if you're in a dogfight like they were against Castres, look, no one expects 100%. But if you want to be a world-class out-half, an Ireland out-half, Munster's talisman, you got to make more of them than that he's making, especially whatever about the one that hit the post when he got timed out. That mistakes happen, but as it went on, he could see something had gone off in his mind and he just wasn't executing those kicks well. Not to lay it all on him. I mean, some of the first up tackling, you're putting your bodies on the line across the board, and then Gavin Coombs misses the tackle for that try on Caravalevu, who was exceptional on the day. And it's a hard tackle to make, but if again, as a player that's held up as someone who Munster fans really want to get in the Ireland setup, and he will have Ireland ambitions, but you're missing a one-on-one tackle on your line. And there was a few of those. Shane Daly missing that one-on-one on the winger, Bamadang. That's all undermining the great stuff, the really slick attack work, the Tacker Abrahams creating stuff out of nothing. Crowley, he's so often finds himself in these scrambled positions, and I'm not sure why he seems to be in those positions so often, but he's making something out of nothing, which seems like when he's operating on instinct, he's really out of strength. He looks very good at fullback, by the way. Edwin the Dogboot comes on, he's brilliant, but then the line-out malfunctions or the scrum malfunctions, and the scrum just isn't good enough at this level. So I think there's a good team there. That's why it's so disappointing. Munster fans conceded. They were capable of winning the URC a couple of years ago. their recruitment, I think, has let them down a little bit. They're not as strong as they were then. They haven't replaced some of those players like with like. You know, they lost Peter O'Mahony and Conor Murray last winter, last summer. Maybe that's a factor in them not winning tight games, because O'Mahony would be such a big game player for them. But overall, they're not the sum of their parts, and all of the excellent stuff that they are able to produce within games to make these games quite, classics. They're not able to win them. Like in Toulon, they were on top, and Toulon were poor in the first half, but they only got 6 points. They weren't able to make their advantage count in that period. And when Toulon had their purple patch, accepting everything Eddie said about the ref, there was probably scope for Munster to pile on points and punish Toulon, as they did the last time they were in Toulon when Zebo was brilliant, and they had Carberry, and they just had a higher calibre of player probably. So it's not like completely, you're not writing off their season. They've got 2 competitions to aim for, and they're both well able to go deep in them, but they've got to kind of arrest this slide and start winning some of these games that are slipping away from them. They're contributing to games. They're doing a lot right.
Crowley, for the record, kicked 2 from 5, and I know you said you can't expect anyone to be 100% all the time, but Cast were 100% from the kicking tee, including 2 out in the touchline. So, look, that is an issue. If you listen to Clayton McMillan afterwards, his assessment of the game probably ties in with your feeling a little bit, Eddie. He says there wasn't one thing in particular: kicks a goal, fell off a few tackles, didn't take a few opportunities, missed some lineouts. It was an accumulation of little things, and that hurt us. He did say of their defence, we don't make it hard for opposition to have to come back and get points, and that is the one worrying trend for me over the last 3-4 weeks. And Rudd touched on the defence there, Eddie. I mean, Tyke Byrne said as well, we fell off too many tackles, first half in particular. You think of the Cara Walevu try. He was brilliant, by the way, their outside centre, really lovely, balanced runner. But there was a maul, a little bit of joy, but then he just sort of runs from deep back against the grain at pace. Like, he bundled through, must have been 3 Munster bodies. It was like a drill where they all had pads and they were just giving him a bang on the way through. And then there was the chip over the top just before halftime, crucial try. And it just spilled out of Jack O'Donoghue's hands under the posts. And again, in isolation, these things happen, but we're not talking fully in isolation here. The other try was close range against 14 men. Discipline, another thing. Like, yet again, second week in a row, down to 14 men, concede 14 points in that window. They've had, I think, four yellows in the last 3 games. And then Rudd mentioned that, the killer try. Like, in a sense, you're a coach and it's a kick out wide and it's one winger against another winger. You're probably feeling okay as the one-on-one happens. And, fast forward a few frames later, Shane Daly sitting on his bum with his hands on his head as the try is touched down. So defence there, that really killed them. And they defended so well in Toulon for huge spells.
But that was my point. I thought the Toulon defence was excellent. And the reason I felt that Toulon, the defence was excellent, they would have talked all week about that. That was their starting point. If the defence was poor in Toulon on a sunny day in the south of France and they were slipping off tackles, they were going to get eaten alive. So the level of urgency, work rate, commitment, and the danger with that, actually, if you're trying to get under the hood a bit on it, is if you put a huge defensive set in like they did in Toulon, and then you come home and you kind of say, well, that's that box ticked. And this week would have been about something else. And always, you slip back in that area. And certainly the defence was nothing like it in terms of intensity. I don't think that Castor would have got those tries if they defended like in Toulon. There's a fact about that. The intensity was off. I think the yellow card was crucial. I mean, there was 2 tries in that yellow card period. And to be fair, Castro had that 80-yarder pull back for what was a forward pass, no question. But they looked vulnerable on just 2 wide passes. So, I mean, you'd like to think that the overall picture is they're getting a lot of stuff right. But as Clayton McMillan, and I thought he was very honest about it after, when I read his comments, I said, yeah, that's exactly what I would have said, is that they're just getting small bits of stuff wrong and they're all costing them. And in tight games, we all know small things cost big, And I suppose you could say the same in Toulon. Rod is right, they had a couple of chances in the first half, maybe to put more pressure on Toulon. They didn't. But I'm just hoping for them that their trajectory was good early in the season, that this last run of kind of gut-wrenching setbacks doesn't derail them. I think there's a lot of good there. I think McMillan is getting them going in the right direction, but they have to stop the small stuff that's really punishing them. And they had enough of small stuff on Saturday. that really cost them a game. Like when you lose a game by a couple of points, you could probably find 10 things that went the other way, you'd have won. But you can't have those 10 things and expect to win.
Yeah, they're paying such a big price for these mistakes because I am in the Eddie camp. I watched them and like I haven't seen Munster attack like this in a while. You know what I mean? Like there was a lot of great stuff. The first try, the Craig Casey try, and they went 10-0 down. Like it was a real Castor here to play. They've named a strong team. They're going after this kind of a thing, and they were like halfway line, nothing really on, and it goes to Crowley and through the centres and Abrahams, who was brilliant all night, and then O'Donoghue, and then suddenly Casey arrives. It's a fantastic try. Like they cut them to shreds, and it was a loose enough game as well. Rud at times, both sides running from deep and both having joy. Like some of Munster's attack, when it clicks, when it goes well, is really excellent. You're looking at this team going, geez, these can really play. They're a great watch. 5 tries at home. You know what I mean? It's why baby out with bathwater here would be that, you know, they need to keep their heads almost, as Eddie said, and focus on so much good stuff. They're almost in the big stuff, the hard stuff well.
Yeah, and I wondered, I think if you go back to that game in Ulster where Macmillan was really critical of their mindset, like no one has played each other more in the European Cup than Cast and Munster over the years, and there's a familiarity there that probably brings with it a certain expectation. And Cast have rarely, if ever, turned up in Thomond Park and played. Never mind the competitiveness, the style of play that they played. Cast have evolved into a very different team with, an All-Black centre and Jack Goodhue, who played for the All Blacks in the World Cup, and Cara Valevu, who we've both mentioned, was exceptional. And I'm sure they did the research, and I'm sure a bit like Leinster and Bayon, were out. I'm sure they told themselves all week that what was coming, but they almost didn't believe it, and they felt like they'd done the hard work in Toulon.
Yeah.
And maybe they felt sorry for themselves a little bit after Toulon, but I think mentally there was like that. Even though they were able to do some great things in the game, were they 100% on it for this game? Were they as ruthless as they should have been? Did they appreciate the danger that was coming down the tracks? This is a team that drew at home to Bayon in the Champions Cup 2 seasons ago. This is a team that hasn't been as good. And Thomond Park is no longer the fortress that it once was. I think we have to accept that, and Munster have to accept that. And they can't rely on Thomond Park and the magic of Thomond Park to get them results. They've got to be. And when these French teams who've kind of assembled these squads, and they're like the Irish system makes it very difficult, and it's a credit to all the provinces that they have been so good over the years. But the Cast don't pick a collection of lads from the Cast area, plus a couple of people they've picked up from other clubs, plus 3 overseas signings. Cast can, sign a Fijian prop. They can get an Argentinian hooker, an English international prop, 2 massive second rows from wherever they can get them. Like they all look like unbelievable athletes, but their line out was exceptional. Their scrum half makes good decisions. Their out half unfussy. Their centres were magic. They've gone and built the squad really well. Munster are more constrained in what they can do, so they've got to be mentally on it. They've got to be perfect. They've got to be really well coached, and they have good coaches, and they looked well coached, but they just looked like that mental preparation was slightly off, and that manifests in a scrum 5 that collapses. Now, I just think their scrum is underpowered, and they are signing a Springbok hooker for next season, and I think they're like Abrahams appears to be leaving, so they may be reinvesting in the tight 5. John Klein is obviously going, so sounds like Ultan Milan's on the way in. He's not like for like. There's moving parts there, and I think they'll have to be really ruthless in their recruitment. They don't have the budget to get them a lot of power, but they can, if they're smart, they can get good players.
I think you're right on the psychology.
Yeah.
And Eddie alluded to it. Like a bit of fear is very healthy when
it undermines all the good stuff.
Defending.
If you're just a little bit off, you can run your lines, you can put together the moves, but when it comes to the one-on-ones, I don't know. I mean, it's maybe I'm grasping, but I think they just saw Cast and said, we've seen Cast before, and the Cast that turned up, well, I wouldn't fancy them in the knockouts.
Yeah.
I think Northampton have them at home. That's going to be some game.
You mentioned line out. Munster's line out was at about 76%. It was 64% against Toulon, 76% against Cast for the record. 5 tries scored for Munster, 4 for Cast, Eddie. The kind of looseness to the game, I mean, it made it a brilliant watch, but both teams had a lot of joy running from deep. Tadhg was asked afterwards about game management, in that Cast started so well, Munster absorbed it to an extent and then started playing, and actually going into the final quarter, you can forget now, Munster were 10 points up. That was the point, Eddie, 22-12 to Munster, where you would have said to yourself, okay, the game's done. We've seen this script before. They got a bit of a scare early on. They've sorted things out. The yellow card happened. The 14 points happened. Tadhg was asked, game management, and he was saying, Yeah, maybe in hindsight we overplayed in our half, gave them a cheap penalty which got them back in the game, but it had been working for us for a lot of the game, so it was kind of hard to turn that off.
Yeah, they ran from deep in Toulon as well a couple of times. You see, I think they're playing Monday quarterback a bit.
Yeah.
And after a game, a player's going to look at things that went wrong. That if we'd kicked that ball instead of running it, we wouldn't have lost the game. I just think you have to see the overarching picture is that I think their attack is working pretty well. I think their defense has blown a bit hot and cold. That's fair. So, like, if their discipline as well, like, I mean, that yellow card was catastrophic on the weekend. But I'm trying to step back from it and not go down rabbit holes on bits and bobs. And then, Crowley's kicking. He has to be a higher percentage kicker in crucial games, which is a different discussion, because I don't want to go down a rabbit hole on the Irish team at the moment. But like, it looks like Harry Byrne is the best place kicker now of the three out halves. Okay, so you're looking into a Six Nations game away in Paris.
Yeah.
So anyway, not to go down that rabbit hole too far, but I would say Munster have to step back and say that every week we've got to be better in our defence. Our defence has to be off the charts every week, or else we're going to get in trouble. Our discipline has to be much better. Their attack is in a good place. I just think they should stay on track with that. The line-out thing is a problem as well. You should be in the 80% at your line-out. I mean, they were lucky they got, a Douglas first try, they actually lost. It was a Munster line-out that they lost.
Yeah.
And if the cast player had just held on to the ball and trying a ridiculous tap back to the halfback, that try was a gimme after losing their own line out. And I suppose at the end, if I'm nitpicking a bit, a Douglas second try shouldn't have been allowed. There was two penalties in that try. One was Byrne ran an obstruction line on the cast number 4 Maravat and blocked him from getting the assist tackle. And there was a double latch from Wycherley and Barron on a Dogba, which that's illegal. Like 5 metres out, there was two of them latched onto him. But talking about Douglas power, I think I'd have probably scored that with the two boys behind me, Like, so it could have been better, but it could have been worse too. But I'm trying to come at this from a point of view that it's two really serious gut punches in 2 weeks for them. Takes them way out of where they thought they were. And for them to come back from this, I don't think there's a ton of things to be fixed. But there's a lot of small things. It's like the engine's rattling at the moment, and there's 5 or 6 things that are causing the rattling. But I think they're all eminently fixable. But the tricky part of that is, as long as those rattling is there, the confidence is going to wobble.
Yeah.
And I think the confidence they took out the first part of the season is now drained. It's gone. Their first 5 games, they would have been in a pretty good place up between their ears. That's all probably dissipated now to the point where they're going to be very nervous from here on in. Maybe running in the Challenge Cup is going to give them a bit of mojo back, but I'm really gutted from because I thought they were on a good track, and I think last Saturday they derailed a lot of good stuff for them.
I guess it forces McMillan into a position, and he's in year one. Like, Richie Murphy's turning up trees this year, but he had a really, last year was really awful for Ulster. Pat Lam took 3 years, and it was sticky in that first and second year. And McMillan now has cause to be really ruthless in his selection, really ruthless with recruitment and retention, to interrogate his coaching ticket, which he brought with his own strength and conditioning expert and a manager, but he's inherited the rest of the coaching team. So will he look at that and go, okay, I need something different. I need to bring someone over from New Zealand who I'm used to working with, and it gives him a bit of a year zero effect. The issue, I suppose, is that his players went off to Ireland camp in November in unbelievable form and came back, and it hasn't been the same since. And I think Crowley in particular, I wonder, is he just finding Ireland just quite stressful, and is it wearing on him when he goes into that Ireland setup? And if selection doesn't go his way during the Six Nations, what state will he be in coming back? Hanrahan hasn't been great. I thought Hanrahan was a clever recruit because he'd been good for Connacht, but it hasn't gone brilliantly for him. Although the last 2 weeks coming off the bench, dovetailing with Crowley, that's been okay. But for McMillan, it's an opportunity, I think, to reboot over the next. They've only got 3 games in the next 2 months. Maybe it's 4 games in the next 2 months because of the Six Nations, and then they've got 2 competitions to aim for, and they're still right in the mix for the URC. And they have the Challenge Cup is winnable. They are one of the teams who can win the Challenge Cup, and that might not be what Munster fans started off the season wanting. But you got to just reset your expectations and try and go and have a weekend in Bilbao and win a trophy.
It's kind of a
tricky part. Sorry, what I was just saying before. You were saying there, I think we talked about how he spent the first few games of the season giving everybody a shot, and saying no, there's no excuses. So on the back of that, he's put his best foot forward 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah.
So the problem is now, where does he pivot now? What can he change in terms of personnel? Even in recruitment, I think their hands are tied. They don't have big money, so he's kind of locked in where he is. I mean, obviously with Abrams, if Abrams goes or Klein goes, he's got to fill those gaps. But in terms of he's did his due diligence at the start and gave everybody a shot, and he said from now on this is best foot forward stuff, and nobody can complain. And that was his best foot forward, and it kind of backfired a bit on him. So where to pivot next, I don't know. He kind of is where he is on that front. So I don't know. There's an easy pivot away there from.
Yeah. The challenge.
I think there are players like their A team has run Leinster closer, have had really competitive games with Leinster. There are good players there. I think Dogbo is someone you can build your team around. Gleeson, his injury was very, very bad timing. I think they'll both be in the Ireland setup. I think Dogbo could be in the 23 in Paris. He was that good on Saturday. There are his younger brother is a very good player. Sean Dogbo, really powerful carrier. I wonder, will he pivot towards youth and start trying to invest heavily in a kind of building a new team and I'd say a few of the old stagers made depart at the end of this season. But that's one area he could go. But it's a fair point from Eddie.
Well, I take your point. I think you're right. But I think mid-season, I'm talking about short-term shift. Where does he shift short? You're talking about a long-term plan here. Go back to basics, build a team off the ground. I think it's a longer project. But for the next 6 months, where does he pivot to? He has what he has now. So I get your point on the longer term. I'm talking more short-term, which I don't think he's very limited option short-term.
There's also the aspect now whereby there's one game and then Six Nations, and suddenly you're waiting until first week of April for your Challenge Cup game away to Exeter, which is just a whole other world away. Like, there is a certain kind of, you wouldn't necessarily always say it about the Challenge Cup, but there is a certain kind of frisson of glamour or big game to it in that. So they're away to Exeter and then they have to navigate the quarters. But Ulster, if form went along lines, Ulster would play La Rochelle in the quarterfinals, and the winner of that game would play Munster in the semi-final. So again, it would be Challenge Cup. But if Ulster were playing Munster or La Rochelle were playing Munster in a Challenge Cup semi-final, it would be quite a good Challenge Cup semi-final. It would feel big.
It's funny what having 3 Irish teams in the Challenge Cup, suddenly there's a frisson of now we have a frisson of excitement. Connacht would say it's always been a great competition. And they obviously have the Sharks at home, which that's a tough draw for them.
Yeah.
Look,
you take my point.
I've been to Challenge Cup finals on the eve of Champions Cup finals, and teams always seem to enjoy winning it. This is not a competition that Irish rugby can sniff at. There's only 3 trophies available at the start of every season, and I have spoken to players. I remember talking to a Connacht player in the week of a Challenge Cup quarter final a couple of years ago, and I did a really good interview with him. And at the end of the interview, I said, "So how are you fixed for the weekend?" And he goes, "We're going to lose. No one here cares about this thing. It's the Challenge Cup." I was like, "What? You can't win the URC, and this is the one thing you could get to a final, have a big day out for your friends, your family, for your fans." And I think there's a danger that certainly with Munster they could turn their nose up at this because of their Champions Cup pedigree, and I think that would be a real mistake for them to do, because you still get a chance to play at the San Mames. You still get a chance for, like, the Red Army will still mobilise, I'm sure, for Exeter into potentially another away game in the quarter final, into it, because they can't be at home. I think in the knockouts unless they get La Rochelle. I'm not sure how that works, but they Rog against Munster in a Challenge Cup semi final, that'll have some glamour to it if they can get there. An Ulster Munster game, wow, that'd be spicy. We can't turn our nose up at this tournament. It's where they're at now, but they got to show that they're one of the best teams in it, and they're only 6th in the URC. There is a Champions Cup spot on offer in this tournament as well. So if things don't go well in the URC, this is a fail-safe for getting back into the Champions Cup. But right now, you'd say Ulster are better contenders given the way they're playing, albeit they haven't had to play teams like Cast or Toulon in recent weeks, or Bath. It was a tough pool for Munster. But it looked like a tough pool from the outset. They've made it look tougher than probably we realised.
Yeah, I know Eddie mentioned it. That decision at the end of the Toulon game. I mean,
yeah,
sliding doors and all that. La Rochelle are there, of course, by the way, in the Challenge Cup because they needed a losing bonus point minimum at home to Harlequins and failed to get it. Marcus Smith, late penalty, 27-17. Rog called it unacceptable. We lost big tonight. So they're away to Newcastle, which he won't be happy with. And then Ulster have Ospreys. Connacht beat Montauban 75-14, 11 tries. 56 points on the board by half time. They have Leinster next Saturday. It's the full opening of the Dexcom Stadium. So, yeah, Challenge Cup is going to be an area of focus for Irish rugby fans over the coming weeks and months. So that's kind of it on Munster. Like the full-time whistle, like a few boos and just kind of oddly quiet, surreal. Can't believe it's happening. I think Eddie's nuanced view is very fair. Their season hangs in the balance. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, but there's still loads to play for. And there's time now. There's a bit of breathing space in the ORC for them to go back to basics but they need to start winning in that tournament as well, because they need to get top 8. But there's lots. I think the better ground suits them towards the end of the season. Like, they've had really good runs in the URC the last couple of years towards the end, under round 3. Even last year they got to the semi-final under a kind of hybrid coaching ticket. So there's lots for them to fix. It's not, but it's just a big dent in their armour, isn't it?
It is.
Munster are a Champions Cup team. They pride themselves on it. And when there's 4 teams going through from each pool, it's quite humiliating to get knocked out at this stage for a team of that. It's, no less with La Rochelle, and you can hear it in Roger's comments. If you pride yourself being in a Champions Cup team, you want to be in that last 16.
Yeah. No, an accumulation of small things, but they're paying a hell of a price for them. Meanwhile, Leinster 22, Bayon 13 over in France. Leinster were 10-3 down at half time. It's yet again a 9th win in a row for Leinster, and no one's that happy. That's the version again. This was kind of an oddly enjoyable game. Like, it's a big downpour. Bayon have a great home record, Basque region. There was a great atmosphere at the game. Bayon, with nothing to play for, were just up for it. It was just like one of those kind of interesting occasions where there's not much at stake here for either side in a way. Leinster obviously wanted to finish as high as they could, but as Bordeaux will attest, it doesn't always work out in your favour if you do. It just kind of took on a life of its own of, we're just playing to win the game.
Exactly that. Like, Eddie would know the Basque Country well from his time at Biarritz. They love their rugby, and it didn't matter that they had 0 points. I always thought this looked like a dangerous fixture because of it was Leinster's first time ever to play in this ground, and it's a unique ground. Irish sport needs 10 Stade Jean Daugets dotted around the country. It is the perfect venue for League of Ireland, for National League games, for provincial. It's a perfect provincial venue. Like, Connacht are opening a new stand next week. It's not a new stadium; it's a new stand.
Oh, yeah.
The RDS are opening will open with a new stand next year. Again, it's not a stadium redevelopment; it's a stand redevelopment. This is like all 4 sides, just the perfect size. Corporate facilities, good media facilities, good dressing rooms. It's just a template, and it doesn't look like it costs that much to build either.
We don't
build stadiums like this.
We don't like 4 sides.
No.
Even the Aviva in Croke Park don't want 4 sides.
I know, but the atmosphere was amazing. And it was a great weekend. It was about more than 1,000 Leinster fans over there. I know they really enjoyed themselves because it felt like a proper. Like, this tournament has delivered in the last 2 weeks. Not every game, but enough there to make you want to save it and to fight for it. And Bayon, with nothing to play for. From the first moment the kick went up, I think it was Max Spring went up and won the ball above a Leinster player. You're like, okay, they're here. These lads are up for this. They picked a good team with Manu Tuilagi in midfield, and they hunted Leinster and they battered them in every contact, and Leinster got no change in the carry. And we have to respect the fact that they found a way to win again. They've won 31 pool games in a row now. They've topped their pool. They're 3rd seeds. They've managed this the least impressive 9-game winning run of all time, but they've won, and they only led that game for 5 minutes, but they found a way. Despite injuries to 4 of their starting players, 4 of their Ireland players, with a back 3 at the end of Sam Prendergast, the fullback, and Luke McGrath on the wing. I know they were able to bring Rico Owane on for Robbie Henshaw. I don't think he's really impressing just yet. Tyke Furlong goes off, but Tom Clarkson is able to deputise really well. Jack Boyle was exceptional, given they've lost their other 2 loose heads. There's a lot to admire within what they're doing, even if you can't escape the fact they're not playing incredibly well. And the question is, I guess, whether they'll be able to fix what's wrong before they start hitting some big hitters later in the tournament. But they've got a nice draw, so it was a much sterner task than they anticipated. I think they were caught on the hop a little bit by the intensity, a little bit like Munster, but they managed to find a way, and they deserve credit for that.
Yeah, it was kind of only last 15 minutes where you felt Bayon slightly tiring physically, Eddie, or just Leinster had managed to absorb it, and the likes of McCarthy off a bench, Sheehan off a bench. What did you make of them in general terms?
I'd be a little less optimistic, than Rudd there. And the reason I say that is We saw again how the other way to crack a blitz is to go through it, and that try from Bayon was off the training park. It was a beautiful try. You spread the defence out and you go through it, or we've talked about a lot of teams trying to get around it, and some teams are very successful, like La Rochelle. But if you freeze frame that Leinster midfield when that strike runner went through, it's like it's all over the shop. Gary Ringrose is up in the middle of nowhere waving like a drowning man, and Henshaw's sitting back, and it's just chaotic. Which again, like, we won't go miss on other teams looking at that. So I don't want to go batter on their defence again, but that to me looked like very vulnerable. I think they were lucky. I think they worked very hard. They stuck in the game. They fought. They were in a bit of a hole in terms of that. You're right. Basque Country is not for the faint-hearted when you're playing a team at home. And Bayon were not going to give up easy. It didn't matter. So they dug in and they fought, and it was a wet day, so it was like an arm wrestle. But I think Leinster were lucky for the 3 tries. I mean, the yellow card that got Jantis in the bin, like Leinster pounced on that. They were short on the edge. There was a great start to play. It put Josh Kenny through. He linked up with Prendergast, out to O'Brien, cuts under, peach of a pass in, cracking line O'Shea, great try. But I think the pass from Prendergast was a mile forward to O'Brien. That should have come back. That should have never been stood, I mean, I looked at it over and again. Prendergast was a metre outside the 22 when he passed it, and O'Brien was a metre inside the 22 when he caught it. So I think when you saw the pass that was called back in Limerick for Castro, I think they were lucky on that, but that was a crucial score. I think the second one, again, a peach of a chip over the top, but there was 3 players from Bayon around the ball, and it bounced back to Prendergast to dot it down under the sticks. And the last try was a line out that went astray that Sheehan picked up on. They scored. So there was an element of luck around the 3 tries they got. I think, though, on another day you might only get one of those, and that they don't win the game if that happens. Really, I think. But I do give them a lot of credit for that kind of. They've got that workman-like attitude around them at the moment. So when they're in tricky spots, they're digging in and they're finding a way out of it. So I'm not trying to take anything away from on that front.
Yeah.
But I think that result could have probably gone the other way if luck hadn't shined a little bit of light on them. Might sound harsh, but I just think that they have to admit that if they're going to lift the trophy this year, they have to shift probably in 2 directions. They have to shift defensively and become better, and they still have to shift on the attack. They're still being very confrontational with the ball and very attritional. And they don't need to be, because you see them sometimes when they decide to let it rip, they are extremely good and very dangerous, and they do tear teams up a bit. But I'd like to see more of that from them and less of the confrontational stuff. And I still have reservations about their D. I don't think they're really tested by Bayon as much as they would be by we saw La Rochelle.
Yeah. Loads in that. It's funny, I remember reading in Sexton's autobiography, the year they kind of waltzed their way to the final, which they lost to La Rochelle in Dublin. He was kind of injured or out for a spell and didn't really feel he could be speaking up, but he felt, as they were blitzing teams in all these games, that there were things not right, and he didn't say anything. And he regretted, actually, we should have been going through it with a fine-tooth comb, but we were just winning so much that we were, it's fine, on to the next game, it's going well. You'd have to say about this current Leinster setup, they're kind of under the cosh a lot. They're certainly being road tested. Their mentality's being road tested. They're being put in a lot of sticky spots. Who knows with that draw? Maybe it stands to them. That's if you're really kind of just reaching for a positive and you assume the attack will improve. The defence, I do take your point on, Eddie. So that Bayon midfield and or try in midfield, people can look at it like it's off a line out, off the coaching park, and like Leinster are numbered up. You've Manu Tuilagi on the ball, and he has 2 options outside him. Henshaw has the first guy, and Ringrose has the second guy. And it seems to me, okay, I know you're saying Henshaw's sitting back. Ringrose just gambles that Tuilagi's going to give it to. He's going to skip the guy immediately inside him and give it to the outside guy. And Ringrose just says, "I'm up." And either Tuilagi knew Ringrose was going to do that because that's what Ringrose does, or Tuilagi spotted him out of the corner of his eye shooting up, and so he changed his plan and gives it to his immediate guy inside him. And then there's there's not much Henshaw can do. There's a massive gap that Ringrose has vacated. So that I don't know if that's systematic or not. That just strikes me as Ringrose just seems to have license to do that, and he just does it.
Well, I think their defence is not as. It's a very aggressive blitz defense. So you watch the line coming up. There's guys coming up, and they're always told to shut off the outside. Don't let the ball get outside you, because if the ball gets outside you, you're in huge trouble, and we see that happen. In this case, what Ringrose tried to do, there was a dummy loop out the back as well with a spot option, which he thought, if I come up and in here, I can stop that pass, which he technically did, but they didn't give the ball to that player. They gave the ball to the winger coming around. And so there's a huge fracture in the line. That's where the winger went through. Yeah. And then he fed it. It was a one pass then. It's a line break. One pass off a line break, you'll probably score. So they kind of suckered Ringrose up into the hole and then dropped the runner, which is the other way to beat the blitz. It comes flying up and you drop runners off the ball carrier on his shoulder. And there's no time to come in and make the tackle. Technically, Ringrose should have sat back there and saw the runner coming off Tuilagi's shoulder and bit down, right? But he decided to go upfield to shut the space outside off, and they took the space on the inside. It was a well-worked play. I would suspect that, to be fair to Bayon, they looked at it and said, yeah, we can pull this guy over the line here. And that's where the hole is. That's what I would see it as. If I was watching it, I would say, yeah, pull him out of the hole. And then we call a rocket play off a playmaker. It's guy coming around like a rocket. So definitely they got set up for that. But it was only once. I mean, it didn't happen again, but I froze that frame and they looked to me like they were literally all over the shop on it. I mean, it was chaotic. But
no, I take your point. In more general terms, I watched a lot of rugby over the weekend. Now, I could be reading this wrong. I didn't sense, okay, you've Ringrose and you've shooters here or there. Both of you give me your thoughts on this. Are we exaggerating like how wild the Leinster line speed is? I watched that game. I don't think they're all as a group shooting up off the line at some rapid speed that lots of other teams aren't. Like, they're not sitting. They're not paddling there doing nothing. No. They're coming up. But like, I don't think this is like some wild, oh my God, have you seen the Leinster line speed thing?
I don't think Bayon, because of the conditions, and Bayon didn't attack with a great degree of width across the game. I'm not sure we saw it in its full capacity. There were probably more, there was probably more around the ruck and more around. So maybe it wasn't the game where they were able to display it, but there have been days where they're just they're so far off the line. I do think it's more, and it's a more extreme version, particularly with Ringrose in there. And
I just wondered, other teams, I wondered, maybe they're softening a touch. You know what I mean? Maybe they are in real. Maybe we're watching them in real time play around with this a bit.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought against La Rochelle they were quite aggressive. Maybe La Rochelle experience burned them a little bit. But obviously the other factor with specifically with that try, but also like Ringrose has played very little rugby this year. He took himself out of the equation for a Lions test only a couple of months ago. We don't know what impact that had on him. That was a big decision. It can't have been easy for him. He got injured in November. That was his first game back. Sorry, not November. He got injured against Harlequins. It was his first game back. So there's a bit of disjointedness and combinations changing all the time, and that's happening a lot with Leinster. So that maybe is undermining their conviction in what they're doing. But certainly, I think if you were, I don't know, I'm sure there are measurements for line speed. I'd say Leinster and Exeter are the two most aggressive teams. Yeah. And I think, Ireland won't follow suit. Ireland will go with a more passive, but that's the wrong word for it because it's not passive, but just a little bit less aggressive. Considered. Yeah, and they want to defend a bit wider as well. I think we saw they were quite narrow against La Rochelle.
I think the thing there with the line speed is the more aggressive your line speed is, the less control you are of yourself. So when you run at 100 miles an hour, you're kind of committed to that line. There's no change in direction. So if you can use plays to pull guys out of the line or drop runners either side of them where they can't adjust. If you're playing a softer defence, you can adjust left or right a lot easier. And that was the classic. I think Leinster's defence is so aggressive. And the number of times we've seen Leinster, the last player tackling the ball carrier, just as the ball carrier receives the ball, receives the pass, Leinster player shuts him down. And you go, oh my God, if this gets outside, they're fried. And we saw La Rochelle fried him a few times. So, I mean, look, we've talked this up and down. It's still a very vulnerable defence. When it works, it's brilliant. When it doesn't, it's catastrophic.
And did you think the line speed on Saturday was every bit as aggressive as we've seen?
It probably was a little bit off when it was against La Rochelle, but I think Rudd's point is good that maybe they got burned against La Rochelle, so maybe they choked the motor a little bit. Yeah. And it was a wet day, so it was even less reason to choke the motor.
That's what I mean. Like, it's a wet. If ever you're going to say, right,
exactly,
what have we been working on for 2 years? It's a wet day. They're going to be like, handling's going to be tough. We smother them. So I was expecting we're going to see. I thought we'd see Jack Nienaber smoking a cigar in the coach's box saying, this is what I'm talking about. And actually it was the opposite. So I think they might be, I think they might be softening. I really do.
No, I'm not sure.
I have to reconsider. After that La Rochelle, it's going to give it gives you pause for thought. That's for certain.
I'm not sure. I mean, I covered the Connacht game a couple of weeks ago. They were really aggressive that day. So I think you need to take a larger sample size than one game. And also, I do
just
think
to look out for it.
The physical toll that the standard of Bayon's contacts would have taken on them. Maybe they just didn't have the energy that they often would have, especially on the back of a La Rochelle game last week. And the kind of this has been a really tough run. And like Cullen made the point that other teams have slipped up in this across this really intense run, and they haven't. Their fitness has held up very well. That was a tough, like really tough. Every contact, every time Caelan Doris carried into contact, it looked really difficult, to try and get anything out of them. So that may have just, curbed their enthusiasm a little bit in terms of what they were able to do without the ball, because they were still gasping for air. They came up with some big plays on their own line. I mean, they could have been much further behind early on. Like Bayon had 2 early trips to the 22, and they turned over a maul between James Ryan brilliantly getting in there and Jack Boyle turning the ball over, and then they won a scrum penalty on their own 5-metre line. Their line out has quietly become very, very slick and formidable. 1 or 2 still go away, but if you compare it to Ireland's and the concerns we have there, the signs are good considering this is largely the Ireland pack. So they've quietly fixed that. Their scrum is quite strong at the moment, and that's a good thing as well.
Ian Madigan said, I think early in the La Rochelle game, they hadn't lost a line out in the competition yet.
Yeah, and then Dan Sheehan left one slip off his hand, which is obviously what happens. And that happened once on Saturday, but it was still very slick, and you could rely on it. Byrne is kicking well. Their line kicking is good. There are elements of their game that are going well, but in terms of that, the defence still has that vulnerability that Eddie mentions, albeit they only coughed up 1 try. There were moments where it looked in trouble, and then their attack just doesn't look as fluent as we've come to expect. It did at times against La Rochelle and against Connacht. Saturday was a tough day for your attack, and that first phase move, accepting the point about the forward pass was good. I think they're better in attack with Prendergast on the pitch. They're better in defence with Byrne on the pitch. Byrne is the better goal kicker. I don't think it was a great game for him, but he got 80 minutes as a starting 10 because Prendergast had to play 15, and it was pretty good at 15. So there are elements, they're nudging towards being better. They're nowhere near where you would expect them to be. They don't need to be that good to beat Edinburgh, I would say, at home. I don't think they need to be that good, although they need to be wary of Premiership opposition based on previous experience at home to Harlequins or Sale Sharks in the quarter-final. I think they need to be very good to beat Glasgow Warriors away from home based on what I saw last night from Glasgow Warriors. If it's Toulon at home, Stormers at home, they need to be good, but I don't think they need to be exceptional. So they can build, and then whoever comes through that horrific other side of the draw, I assume it'll be Bordeaux, because I think Bordeaux are the best team in Europe right now. I don't know if they're built to beat Bordeaux. I think the pace that Bordeaux have on the edge, the creativity they have, the forward pack they have, they're very smart, they're well coached. That's going to be a massive challenge. That's always been Leinster's, can they get over the line in it? But I think they can make incremental improvements to that point and still be good enough to navigate their way through this knockout.
I think their attack is, for me, their 2 best playmakers are Gibson Park and Snyman, really. Like, if you look at it, that's kind of a crazy thing to say. But the good things that happens off Gibson Park around rucks, that big short side break on the weekend was Gibson Park spotting a short side, pulling a couple players out of the line, but a peach for passing their way. And Snyman's offloads, he's the guy they're sending to the line, and he's getting hands free all the time and they're feeding off him. But outside of those 2 things, and maybe some really good starter plays, like they run them at times, they're just not in a rhythm in attack that you think they're going to break teams down. They're going to go 6-8 phases here and going to dot it down. You're not seeing that from them. And the trouble is, if you're not seeing it now, when is it going to happen in a big game against a team like Bordeaux? Where you're going to have to do it on the day. You might only get 3 or 4 chances, and you've got to nail 2 of them if you're going to win the trophy. So at just a moment, I think, from a playmaker's point of view, outside of Gibson Park and RJ Snyman, they're not really creating a ton of stuff. That's my worry on their attack. And they have the horses. That's the frustrating thing. They're dripping with talent. They've got 2 new wingers now, Kenny and O'Brien, who are tearing it up.
One welcome development that I think this has been lacking in Irish rugby for a number of years, but they're very good in the transition. They've become very effective on counter-attack, and Irish teams have been so conservative on counter-attack for many years. It's obviously part of Nienaber's approach. South Africa will be very good, but with Kenny's pace and his vision, he turns something into nothing regularly. Yeah. Tommy O'Brien has it as well. Even Jimmy O'Brien made a really good counter-attack. They're being empowered to run the ball back. We saw it with Crowley against Leinster. So there's players now showing a bit more in the transition. That bodes well, I think, because that's a part of Ireland's and Leinster's armoury that wasn't really exploited for a long time. Be interesting to see how Keenan kind of fits into that when he comes back. But that's one area where they're getting, like, against La Rochelle, their transition won them the game. And there were times where they were really under the cosh on Saturday, and Bayon would kick, and it looked like a good kick. And Kenny, just from nothing, that sevens background, that incredible athletic prowess he has.
Well, there was the one
he's opened things up.
He was going lateral, and you thought, oh, he's in trouble here. He's going to get smothered up, and then
glides past
pace, and then he straightened the line, and it's brilliant. Like as you said, something out of nothing, which Irish teams need. It's funny. I was Virgin Media had their Six Nations launch, and Conor Murray's one of the pundits, and this wasn't off the record. We're doing the whole Prendergast. Crowley, talk to us. And he was like, yeah, look, my sense from being in the meetings at the start of the week where the 9s and 10s would all get together and talk about a week, my sense is that Andy likes Sam. That the way Sam talks in those meetings, for a young guy, you can tell he is tactically brilliant and has a great sense of the game. The way he breaks down opposition, the way he talks. This whole how they run the week line that people mention all the time. Murray's sense from those meetings is that Farrell really likes Prendergast and Prendergast's feel for rugby, his analytical brain, which was quite interesting. Rob Kearney was there as well at the launch, and I said, who's going to start, Crowley or Prendergast in Paris? And he said, neither. Harry Byrne's going to start. So it's cooking. That number 10 thing is cooking.
Yeah, I wouldn't be putting any money on it right now, but I have that sense as well. And I think Prendergast has shown that a bit of flexibility to go fullback in recent times, to come into games and having watched from the stand and think his way through them. I think there's a real danger for Crowley that he's not going to be into 23 for Paris, which would be a massive kick in the teeth for him. But that image I have of him on Saturday, not to mind the kicking issues, the amount of times he found himself scrambling like a quarterback whose offensive line have been beaten, and he's just trying to find a way. He's trying to find a run, and he has no options. And often he did find a way, but Ireland Ireland don't want them scrambling. Ireland want them in full control of what he's doing. You rarely see Prendergast in a similar situation, partly because he's behind a better pack. That's not Crowley's. He's behind the 8 ball on that, and that's no fault of his. He's a Munster player, and he's proud of it. But I think he hasn't played well since November. He didn't play particularly well in November, and I think he's losing ground, and the goal kicking is just going to be another thing that's held up against him, and I think he's possibly judged by a higher standard, which is really unfair on him. And Byrne wasn't exceptional by any means. I thought some of his kicking was only okay, some of his decision making, like, it was tough, everyone was getting beaten up, but he kicked 2 of his 3 goals. He combined well with Prendergast, and he got the team over the line. And I think there's a growing feeling that Ireland are almost, because his defence is better than Sam's, it might be even better for Sam that he's taken out of the firing line for a little while, and that Harry, the older of the 3, is probably just ready for this moment. Now, it might not be the right decision. It'll be a huge call, a big source of debate. They'll all be in the squad when it's named on Wednesday. For all, he might be even in there as well with them. He was training before the game on Saturday, so he's fit, and he's able to fit into a number of different positions. But there's definitely a bit of momentum behind Harry Byrne, and it's not. I don't think it's coming from nothing.
And sorry, this may be too technical. I'll bring it out in a sec. In my mind's eye, when you describe Crowley, the attack is broken down, and he's kind of scurrying, ball in hand, and looking for an opening, looking to reignite something. I mean, DuPont does that, and we're all like, this is beautiful. Why do they not want Crowley doing that?
Well, because they're such a structured team. Ireland are an incredibly structured team, and they want to be like, the whole thing is built around Johnny Sexton, and the whole problem is we're trying to replace this guy who was able to see 6, 7, 8 pictures in a row. I actually think this room, if Hugo Keenan isn't fit, I would seriously consider starting Jack Crowley at 15 in Paris. I think all of those skills that he has are perfect. That second set of eyes, that ability to get him to think himself out of trouble, to think on his feet, to operate out of structure. I think there's a real argument for him to be in that 22 role and come on a fullback and affect games from there. But I don't think it's what Ireland want from their 10. They want the guy who can see the picture 4, 5, 6 phases in a row, think the team through the game. And I think they see Byrne, like they're seeing Byrne with that, but he hasn't been tested enough. It'd be a huge call to pick him. and they've given Prendergast the keys. I think Prendergast does everything they want to do in attack. They're just the concerns over his defence and his ability to live in that kind of power against a French team would be a big element. It's a huge call. Like, it's mad we're still talking about it, but it's still right there.
No, it is. Eddie, you're the man who has to make these decisions for real and know what it's like to really put your neck on the line. You know, it's easy for us to throw it. Try him there, do this, give that a roll of the dice. You get one chance in Paris and it goes badly, it's on you. So what would you do?
Well, I think what he'll look for who's the 10 and take all the names out of it. Who's the guy at the moment that gives the team most stability in attack and defence? And it's just going to kind of, because the way we play the game, so much of what Ireland do comes through the 10 because it was Johnny Sexton, and we are trying to replace him. So if you weigh it up, I think the third thing is, if it comes down to kick, who's going to kick the crucial penalty with 5 minutes to go? On the penalty front, Harry Byrne's got the edge on the other two boys. Like, his kicking is more reliable, and I think there was interesting. He stepped up against La Rochelle to make that kick. He wanted it. He knew he had to make it. He puts his name on the ticket by doing that. There's a big discussion. I think the attack side, the defence side of things, I put Crowley and Byrne are solid. I think the vulnerability is around Prendergast. He's going to be targeted. It's not that he doesn't throw his body on the line, but it's just physically he gets overrun. And then in attack, the most creative of the three is Prendergast. So, like, they all tick one box.
Yeah.
None of them tick all three. And then you say, well, who ticks the best two boxes? Probably at the moment, I suppose, if he's going to back someone into the future, he will go Prendergast again. He will go, like, I've got to give it. Because if you take Prendergast out of it now, it sets them back big time. And we were talking this time last year, and the way the Six Nations played out, that he had hung his hat on Prendergast. There's no question, no doubt about that. And he had to recalibrate that. But I think a year on, he'd want to back him again. And I think it would have been a case for Crowley. Had Crowley had two big outings at Munster in the last 2 weeks where he blew the doors off, I think Crowley could probably nick it. But I have a feeling at the moment, because to shunt away now to Harry Byrne in Paris would be a massive shift. And what does that say to the two prototypes he was developing for the last 2 years? So it's a very complicated one, but I have a sense he's going to have to back Prendergast here and say, right, I'm just going to go with it, going to trust him, give him all the support I can. That's where I think he'll go. That's probably where I would go as well in the circumstances.
Right.
You know,
yeah.
In my position, I think, because none of the three of them tick all the boxes. And there's an element of backing the guy you want at the end of the day, who's probably going to be your starting 10 in the World Cup. So that's why I would read it.
Yeah.
But it's easy for me to say that. You're heading on Thursday night into Paris, first game of the Six Nations, which kind of defines momentum. If we win in Paris, I think we could be talking Grand Slam, because to go to Twickenham, well, we could beat England. Twickenham would have won a roll. But you lose in Paris, you lose in Twickenham, the whole Six Nations becomes a rescue job, you know. So there's a lot hinging on that selection alone.
Yeah, big time. Fascinating, fellas. But by the way, briefly, the injury front, is Tommy O'Brien serious? Calf?
Tommy O'Brien didn't look happy coming off. We haven't got a bulletin from Leinster just yet. Furlong, I sounded more precautionary.
Okay.
Tommy and Jimmy O'Brien both didn't look great, and then they were both soft tissue. That's what the calf definitely with Tommy O'Brien, and then Robbie Henshaw was a knee, and he left the stadium in a knee brace. We'll know more later, but I would anticipate that three of them are in trouble for the Six Nations, given it's only 2.5 weeks away. Furlong, I think there was an element of I can't get through this, but I'm okay. They said if Clarkson had gone down, they probably would have brought Tig back on.
Okay.
So that doesn't sound too alarming, because Ireland have already definitely lost Paddy McCarthy, probably Andrew Porter. Keenan's obviously a doubt. Ryan Baird is out. Jamie Osborne's out. There's a few who've dropped, so they don't want to lose too many more based on where they are now.
Yeah, okay. That was our rugby coverage, sponsored by Energia. Thank you to Rory O'Connor here in studio, and Eddie O'Sullivan as ever. Thanks, Eddie.